and welcome back to Inspired by Babies. Today I am super excited. I am going to be demonstrating how I root my reborn baby dolls. So, as most of you know, I do have a tutorial series on my channel about how to paint reborn baby dolls. And I do have a hair rooting tutorial on there that kind of gives a basic idea, but I never really actually demonstrated how I root a reborn baby doll. So throughout the last couple of years, I have taught thousands of people how to paint their reborn babies. If you look at the tutorials, they speak for themselves. You can read the reviews. They're my most watched videos. Everyone has really been enjoying them. And like I said, I do have a hair rooting tutorial on there, but it basically is just an explanation as to how to root. In that video, I don't actually demonstrate. You probably have asked yourself a whole bunch of times why nobody actually just gets on camera and demonstrates it for you guys. And the reason is because it's really difficult on camera to try to show you how to root a baby. You have to really be able to look up close to see what you're doing, and the tool is so small. Of course, the hair, you can barely see it, and it's just really hard to get that on camera. So there's not very many hair tutorials out there. So as you can see here, we have little baby Ava. Aww. Turned out so awesome. Ava is ready to get some hair, so I figured it would be a perfect time for me to do this tutorial for you guys. But before I go ahead and get started with showing you guys how I root my babies, I want to make sure that you guys hit that big thumbs up for me and hit the subscribe button if you're not already a subscriber. This way, every time I release new tutorials, and I will be releasing a new tutorial series as well. It's going to be a more advanced version. So make sure you smash that notification bell. This way you can be notified every time I put out a new video. And I really appreciate that. Also, I want to let you know that I do have a membership here on my channel. It's called Belle's Break Room. And for the low cost of a cup of coffee a month, you can become a member of Belle's Break Room. You can cancel that at any time. It helps support my channel. It makes it so that I can keep bringing content like this to you, as well as I share behind the scenes, work in progress that you guys, members, you're usually the first to see. And not just that, but my students are able to reach out to me on a more personal level to ask me questions if they have questions about the tutorials. So, okay, so that being said, let's get into this. So what you're going to need to root your baby is you will need a pair of scissors. You will, of course, need a hair rooting tool, and I just used this basic tool from Bountiful Baby. I've tried using other tools and they haven't worked out very well for me, so I just used this one. If you are going to use this, you may want to order a couple of them, because this little black piece that's on the inside that holds the needle, you only get 2 or 3 of them with each one. And eventually they do wear down, or they break, or sometimes they're just made a little bit odd and the needle doesn't sit right. And you can't just buy these little black pieces individually, at least not that I've been able to find. So each one you buy, you will get a couple extra black pieces that's inside here to hold your needle. And what I'm using today is a number 42 gauge forked needle. The higher the number, the smaller the needle will be, the smaller the hair plugs will be, and you want to have as small of a hair plug as possible. This way the hair looks nice and natural, like it's growing directly out of the head. So I prefer to use the 42 gauge forked needle. There are other needles as well. There's 1 barb, there's 3 barbs, there's 6 barbs. If you like to use the root-a-loop method, which I can refer you to my last hair rooting tutorial if you're really new to this, The root-a-loop is a very easy kind of technique for beginners where you actually loop the hair and then just pull the loop one hair at a time. The only reason that I don't use that technique anymore is because, well, one, I'm not a beginner anymore, and two, automatically every time you put a hair in, it's going to be at least 2 hairs because you're essentially like folding the hair in half, if you guys understand what I'm saying. With the forked needle, you have a better chance of getting 1 to 2 hairs every time you poke. So that's what I prefer to use. You're going to need tweezers just in case you do get say a hair might be a little bit too thick compared to the rest. Every once in a while, a thick hair that doesn't really belong there gets mixed in with the rest of the hair. So every once in a while, either you might make a little mistake, or you know, the hair might be too thick or something. For any reason you need to pull a hair out, you will need tweezers. And what I use to draw my hair rooting map is a Czech Rep. That's CZECH Rep pencil. This one is sepia light. I use this and you can kind of see the color here. So anytime I root a brown haired baby, I use this pencil. And I'll talk more about this pencil here in a minute. You will need some form of mohair conditioner, and I like to use a little toothbrush to brush the baby's hair very gently as I'm rooting. This helps keep the hair out of the way, and it also helps me have an idea of how my hair rooting's actually going, if I'm getting the shape or the desired effect that I want. This particular brand I got from GoBaby.com. I'm sorry about that. www.gobabydollkits.com is where I purchased this particular brand, and I pretty much have used this brand as long as I've been reborning. I really love it a lot. And of course, you will need some mohair, and you will need your completed baby head. So this is the HP Baby Locks Baby Brown. I normally like to get my hair from Slumberland Nursery, but I ran out of Slumberland Nursery, and getting hair, especially in the color I want, is getting more and more difficult with everything that's been going on with the pandemic. But I was able to find this available at Bountiful Baby, and I've used HP Baby Locks before, and it is pretty good. It's thin. It does sit on the head very nicely. The only difference between this and what I typically like to use is it's not quite as soft, but it is still soft, and it will still give me the effect that I want to have. So that's what I'm using today. You can use yearling. Yearling is really good. The only thing that I don't like about yearling is it can be super curly and it can get tangled easily, but I do like to use that if I'm intentionally, you know, trying to make a curly haired baby. But the great thing about HP Baby Locks and the Slumberland hair is that it's straight. And I actually prefer to have either slightly wavy or straight hair on my babies. The first thing that you want to do, of course, is you need to draw a hair rooting map. Now, if you're super experienced already, which I'm gonna guess you're probably not like super experienced, or you wouldn't need my tutorial, right? But, you know, if you are super experienced, you might be the kind of person that can just eyeball it and, you know, root it without needing a hair map. But I'm a super kind of picky person, so if you're picky like I am and you want everything to be like just right, and you're really OCD about it like I am, then you're gonna want to draw a hair rooting map first. And as you can see here, I already drew my hair rooting map on Ava. And I'm gonna click some photos of this. This way you can kind of have this to use as a reference. So there is Ava. She's ready to be rooted. Already got her map done. And like I said earlier, I am using this Czech Rep pencil. And the reason I love this pencil is for a few reasons. I have tried Prisma pencils, I've also tried the chalk pens or just straight up chalk, the white chalk, okay? Now, whenever I use the Prisma pencils, I always have a hard time getting the lead to stay on the head as I'm drawing. I'm not able to just get one nice smooth line. And when you're drawing, you want to try to really have one continuous smooth line. You don't want to have a whole bunch of lines and have it look like a sketch or something. I think you understand what I'm trying to say, right? Like, I just want one smooth line. I want to be able to smoothly draw the pencil across without having to keep going over it and over it. And I don't know, I just was really having a hard time with the Prisma pencils. The lead on the Prisma pencils, it's really hard. If you have to press too hard to get the color to stay, now you're risking scratching the doll and, you know, scratching up the paintwork. And it's really hard to wash off as well, I noticed. Now, when I use the chalk, just like straight up white chalk, it always rubs off or smudges or whatever when I'm trying to root. And then it's like, oh, dang, where was that line now? What direction was I rooting that now? Dang it. You know what I'm saying? So if it's coming off while you're in the middle of trying to root, then if you're like me, you might forget what direction you were rooting or something. So I didn't really care for the chalk. But with this pencil here, it is a type of colored pencil. It is harder than chalk, but it's softer than the Prisma. It's like just right. It's like in between the two of them. And so as you can see here, I'm able to get a nice hair rooting map that's very easy to see. Okay, it goes on very easily, and I'm going to show you that right now. Even though, don't worry, I know I already have my map done and it's like all perfect, but watch this, okay? So I'm drawing a line up. See how easy and smooth that just went on? See that? How easy? Goes right on, stays on. As I'm rooting, it might come off a little bit. It might come off a little bit as I'm rooting, but it doesn't really smudge, as you can see. And it stays on enough that I will be able to see where I'm rooting the entire time. And then the other great thing about it is that if you make a mistake, I'm going to show you. I forgot to say, I always keep a washcloth around, and I get the corner of the washcloth wet, and I always have that next to me while I'm drawing my hair rooting map. So here's the lines that I just drew, and I don't want those lines, so I'm just gonna wipe them off. And look at that, gone. Can't even tell it was ever there. Let me show you that again. Drawing a line, that time I kind of drew it dark, right? And then I just take my washcloth if I'm not happy with that line, and it just wipes right off. And all I had to do was just wipe that very gently. I didn't have to sit here and scrub it, you know, like you do with the Prisma pencil. If you make a mistake, you really have to scrub it, because I just really don't like to do any kind of damage at all to my paintwork. So that's why I really like to use this pencil. And it might be a little bit more expensive than the Prisma pencils are, but I've already had this pencil for 3 years and I haven't even gone through a third of the pencil yet. So it is well worth it. It is well worth it to have a pencil that's going to allow you to have a map that's going to stay on your baby the entire time you're rooting, that you can wash off easily, that's not damaging your baby. It's worth the extra $1 or $2, you know what I mean? So now, to draw my hair rooting map, what I do is I look at my nose, okay? So if you were looking at it, look straight onto it and find the tip of the nose. And then I kind of take the pencil and I follow from the tip of the nose, and I try to kind of cut the head in half. So that's that center line that you see there. And if you can see, see how it is, it's really hard to show on camera, but you can kind of see there that my line is kind of lined up with the tip of my nose, okay? And I just continue that line all the way around and down the back of the head. And I split my head in half. And then what I do is I go from the corner of the lip at an angle, and I get my first line going, you know, along the side of the head to meet up where this half line is. But after you do that on both sides, from the corner of the lips over, and you meet it up with this first center line that you drew, you'll have kind of a plus sign there. Where the plus sign meets and comes together, the center of that is where I start out my swirl. Okay? So that's how I start it. And pretty much the basic idea, I like to root directionally, so as you can see, I have a really nice swirl going on here. And the great thing about drawing the map is you can kind of tell by how the map looks how the hair is going to look. And if my map looks good and it's already starting to look natural and look like hair just based on the shape of my map, then I know it's how I want it. So I just kind of look, I judge by the shape of the baby's head, and I just spend a little bit of time actually like observing the baby, looking at it, studying it, and I get a picture in my mind about how I want the hair shape to be, and then I kind of go from there. And the basic idea is to kind of start out from your swirl and you just draw, okay? And as you're drawing the lines, you want everything to be nice and smooth, okay? Like one line, nice and smooth, continuing in the nice direction. You want everything to kind of be leading off from this same point and swirling around from this same point, if that makes sense. So that's the best way that I can explain how I draw it. I mean, I just find a line, and then I kind of have everything meet up where the swirl is supposed to be. So you can see how I have that, how it's all met up in the back there. And everything, all the lines come together very nicely. And that's how I draw my map. And like I said, it's kind of hard to explain how to draw a hair rooting map. So I will include pictures so you can kind of use that as a reference if you would like. And that's how I do that. On this side here where you see this curve here, I'm not necessarily rooting hair here, but I just like to have that in case if I do want to do baby hairs or any of that kind of thing. It gives me an idea of where the sideburns are going to be and how it's all going to meet up to the top hair. So that's why I have this little curve here. Okay, so once you have your map drawn on, then you are ready to root. Now, you don't have to root directionally, and I'm not going to sit here and try to claim that I'm the best hair rooter in the community or anything like that. This is how I do it. This is how it works out the best for me. This is how I get my best results. But in the end, just like with painting, as you go, you will kind of find your own techniques. You will end up having your own hair rooting map. You'll end up having your own techniques as to how you're going to root in the end of it all. But this is just kind of a basic idea as to how I do my rooting and what works for me. I know that some people, when they root, they actually like to root this way, and they start from toward the face, or they start from the opposite side away from them, and they like to poke the needle and kind of work their way back like this, pulling the needle toward themselves. I have a really hard time rooting that way. I break needles, and to me it's just awkward. what I find in artwork is the more natural movements you can have, even when it comes to like canvas painting or drawing or anything like that. The more natural you're able to hold your hands and your arm, and the more natural of a movement you can have, the better the result, in my opinion. But I have seen people who have actually rooted from this direction with the needle coming toward them, and I prefer to not root that way. One, I feel like if I slip, I'm going to stab myself with the needle. For two, I can't be sure that I'm getting the correct angle every time. And three, I was just breaking needles like crazy. So what I actually like to do is, it's pretty much the same thing, except for I like to do it from this way and kind of hold my rooting tool like it's a pencil or something. That's the best way I can explain it. I kind of hold it like this, or maybe even like this, to where I'm kind of having like this kind of motion. And I like going from this direction and working my way back instead of toward me, if that makes sense. Now, the things that you really have to remember the most is to be careful of your angle when you're rooting, okay? When you're rooting, and this is what makes it hard. When you are rooting, you don't want to have your needle straight up and down, okay? It's going to be hard to show you what I mean by that, but you don't want to have your needle at a 90-degree angle going from, you know what I'm saying? You don't want to be going in straight up and down. You need to have your needle at an angle like this, okay? You need to have your needle at an angle. Don't have it up and down like this and go straight in and out. You'll break a ton of needles. And then not just that, if you poke your needle straight in, then your hair is going to stick straight out instead of sitting nice and flat onto the head like you want it to. If you go at about, I would say, a 35 to 45 degree angle, and you'll also know if you're doing it correctly as well, because if you're not doing it correctly, it'll make a weird noise, you'll break your needles, you'll feel a lot more resistance when you're trying to poke the hair in. So watch what's going to happen if I poke the needle straight in. Oh my goodness, I'm afraid to do it, to be honest. Look how hard that was to get that in there. Wow. And did you hear the noise it made when I pulled it out because it resisted? But if you go in at an angle and you're going in correctly, it should go in relatively easy and come right back out. A lot of people, they like to use those needles without a handle that just has the rubber on the end. I don't like using those, the uncut needles, because you have no control over it. There's this much of a needle left at the end, and you're poking from way up here, so you don't have as much control. And I just found that I was breaking needles all the time. I like to just have a little bit of the needle left. So I buy those same needles, but then I cut them down myself so that they'll fit into this tool. And I like using this tool. So go in at an angle, see how much easier that was? I could just sit here and keep poking it over and over. It goes in very nice and smoothly. If your angle's off and you're going at too much of an angle, it's going to come in, you're going to go in one side and come back out of the head. You'll come back out of the scalp, and then that won't be a good thing. We want the hair to stay in there. We want the needle to stay in there. So we're going in at an angle like that. And see how smoothly that's going in, because I'm going in at the correct angle. And, you know, if I was going straight, I would have to go a lot slower, and it would give me a lot more resistance than that. If you go in just right, then okay, it's gonna look like, no matter what you do, it's still gonna look like the hair is coming straight out, even though you went in an angle, but I assure you it's actually not coming out straight out. And once you use your conditioning Mo spray as you're going to brush it down, it will stay the way it's supposed to. Very nice and flush to the baby's head, which is, I just love to have that hairstyle. Now, if you want to have the hair sticking up, I mean, I guess that would be your choice to do. If you wanted some of the hair to stick up, like say, you know, back here in this area, you could go more straight in and the hair will stand out. So before I go ahead and do the demonstration, the only other thing that is kind of important to know is a little bit about technique. So if you are the kind of person like me who really likes to have a thin head of hair, or maybe a little bit thicker on the sides and top and thinner on the side, okay, there's different things that you can do to give your baby that effect. You can use blonde. Blonde gives the thinnest hair look. So maybe I do a darker color on the sides and I do a little bit of blonde here for the sideburn, and it all blends a little better and it makes it look super thin where the sideburns are. So basically what I'm saying is your hair color choice will kind of give you either a thinner hair look or a thicker hair look. The darker the hair color, the thicker your hair is going to look. Also, depending on the type of hair and using the darker hair makes the plugs a little bit easier to see, but it's still really not that bad. I mean, you still really can't see the plug, but of course, the lighter hair color you use, the less noticeable the hair plugs will be. And what I mean by hair plug is the little hole, like the little spot where your needle entered the vinyl. So the lighter the hair, the thinner it will look. Okay. The other thing is, as far as thinner and thicker, the closer together that you space out your hairs, the thicker your hair is going to be. The further apart you poke the holes, the thinner the hair will look. And there is actually one more thing that is important to know before I go ahead and do my demonstration for you, is that if you are rooting directionally like me, what directional means is that my needle direction is going to change to go with the flow of the direction of my hair rooting map. So if I want my hair to follow this shape, that means as I'm rooting, okay, my needle is also going to have to go in that direction. And that's directional rooting. Rather than just taking my needle and poking up in this direction the entire time, I'm actually following it just as if I was drawing with my pencil, if you see what I'm saying. So here my map is kind of starting out kind of straight, so I'm going straight. And then as I'm going, my direction of my needle is going to follow the direction of my hair. Okay, with the top is easy because you pretty much are just, you know, going straight. But you want to make sure you're turning your needle a little bit at a time as you're following your own pattern. And it's kind of really hard to kind of explain that. So I would just be poking and see how my needle, I turned it to go the direction that my hair rooting map is. And that's directional rooting. And that's how I get my nice swirl to stay in that swirl position without trying to force it just by brushing it. It will actually keep that position no matter what I do. Okay, so now that I've explained all that, I am going to just root a little bit of the hair for you so that you can see what I'm doing, and I will show you what it looks like if you poke the holes close, if you poke them far apart, that kind of thing. That way you can see what I mean by all that. So here is my mohair. You can see this is super long. It's okay, depending on how short you want to cut your hair in the end, you could cut this into 3, or you can cut it in half. It just depends. But when you decide to measure, make sure you take into consideration, and I did forget to mention this, as we're rooting, each hair is going to go in about 1/4 of an inch to 1/2 an inch. The more that you can get it in there on the inside, the better, because then when you glue it down, it's going to stay better. So the more hair that's left on the inside, the better it's going to stay. The less likely that it's going to be able to be pulled back out just from brushing or something like that. So when you measure your hair out and you cut it down to just use a little bit of it, keep in mind that by the time you push that hair inside with the needle, that you're going to lose about 1/2 an inch of your length. This is really super long, so I should be able to get away with cutting this into thirds. So I just separate a little bit of it. You don't want to literally cut a third and try to use the entire thickness of your thing of hair. You just want to separate a little bit of it like that, and then you can cut off the length that you need. So there we go. You can see that. And when you're rooting, you actually want to have the part that you just cut, the cut end, is what you want to be against your baby as you're rooting. That's the end that you want to be on the inside. If you try to do the other end that's not cut, the needle won't catch it. It's a lot easier for the needle to catch it if you use the cut end. So what I like to do is I usually like to start on a side. You can choose, but I like to start on the side of the head, and then I work my way around, and I get the back, and I come around to the other side, and I get the sides and the back done first, and then I come back up and I work on the top. And when I root, I always start from the bottom, so near the nape of the neck, or down from near the ear, on the top of the head. I like to start from here toward the face, and then I work my way back. Start from here and work my way up. Start from the nape of the neck and work my way up. It makes it a lot easier, because if you start from here and you work your way this way, then the entire time you're rooting, your hair is going to be in the way of your needle. And what happens is you root some hair, and then as you're trying to root other hair, you're accidentally catching the hair you already rooted, and now that's also going back in for a second or third time. So that's why I don't like working from the top down. The hair just gets in the way. It's much easier to work your way from the bottom up. And as you go, you can use your mohair spray to brush the hair you've already rooted down so that it won't be in your way as you're rooting. So like I said, normally I start on the side, but since I'm trying to demonstrate this for you, I'm gonna do that on the back of this baby's head. So what I'm gonna do is I'm holding my hair, okay? I'm giving myself enough space that I can hold the hair flush down to the baby's head like that. It is literally flush down to the baby's head. And the trickiest part is starting out, because if you're using a 1, 3, or 6 barb needle, you need to make sure that the barbs are turned in the right direction. And it's the same thing with the fork needle. So sometimes you have to poke it. Sometimes you have to poke it a few times. And I got it the first time that time. So sometimes you have to poke it a few times and then check and see if the hair is actually staying. If it's not, then you'll have to ever so slightly keep turning, keep rotating this in your hand until you have it in the right position and the needle is catching the hair. And like I said, if you make a mistake, it's not a huge deal. You just take your little tweezers and you can pull the hair right back out. So once again, I'm going to stay with the direction. I'm going to stay with this direction that I have my hair rooting map. And I'm just going to root a few hairs here for you so that you can see the difference between the hair if it's rooted and very far spaced out, and then I'll root some close together so that you can see the two different effects and how you can make the hair look either thinner or thicker. So I'm just going to go ahead and root a few hairs for you. And as you can see, I hope you can see that I am holding my needle at an angle. Now, I know that some artists are really specific and they like to use a magnifying glass and, you know, like they're really picky about making sure they're literally just pulling out one hair at a time and then poking it. But with the forked needle, you really don't need to do that. The forked needle, if you get a small enough one, it'll automatically only grab 1 or 2 hairs without having to go through all that. So because I'm rooting at an angle, you can see how easy my needle's going in, so I could tell I'm doing it in the correct area, and see I was able to poke it several times and every hair stayed. So there's my hair right there. So I spaced those ones out a lot, and right next to it, I'm going to try to get some really close together so you can see what I mean about the thickness and the thinness. Okay? And I can already tell. But this is the other reason why I like the DH locks too. It's a lot faster to root with it because it is a little bit thicker. But here you can already see the difference. On this side you can barely see. I spaced it out a lot. And on this side I only put a few hairs. But you can see it's there, like clear as day. You can see that that is there compared to this, because I spaced this out a lot and I put these ones close together. So I find that if you root thin enough that some of the scalp is showing through, it looks more natural. I actually don't like to make my hair super thick to where you can't see any of the scalp unless it's requested by a customer. And if you like the thin look, that is fine too. But you have to keep in mind that if you go too thinly, it's just not going to look natural looking. So you have to be careful not to space it out too much, because otherwise you'll see every plug and it'll just be kind of unnatural looking. But that is how I do it. And then, like I said, I just keep in the direction that my hair rooting map is. Make sure that your angle is good. And you can just root a few hairs like that, pull, and then the hair will be left. And that's pretty much all there is to rooting. And like I said, it is kind of hard to show on camera. And once you get good at it, here's the other thing too, like once you get good at it, if you have your needle at the right angle as you're going, you won't need a heating source or anything like that to root the baby. Once you get good at this, and as long as you have your needle at the right angle while you're rooting, you won't need a heating source in order to do it. I thought I would, but to be honest with you, I broke more needles using it with heat in it than I have since I've been doing it without the heating source. It's actually easier for me to see without the light source inside or the heat inside. The rice bags, they just smelled so nasty, I couldn't stand it, so I gave up on that whole thing. And then I came to find out and realize, as I got better and better at it, that I didn't actually need all that. I actually realized that using the heat made the vinyl expand more as I was poking the needle, and the hair wasn't staying in as well. It stays in much better for me when I don't use the heating source and I just stick it straight into the vinyl without heating it up first. But that's just me, and like I said, everyone has their own technique. What's easy for me may not be easy for somebody else. But I hope that this helps you guys out a little bit. I know, I can't pick up the baby and bring it close to you and then, try to show you really up close. But I think the lighting was pretty good and you guys were able to see what I was doing pretty well. So if you have any questions, feel free to ask me in the comment section below. I think I covered everything. Maybe I will do a video about eyebrow painting at some point. But for the time being, at least you guys should have the basic idea as to how I root my reborn babies. Hair cutting is a whole nother thing. Once I am done rooting this baby, I will show you guys how I root my eyelashes, and I will show you guys how I cut my hair. So that'll be another tutorial for you guys to look forward to. I don't think I ever actually did like an eyelash rooting tutorial or a hair cutting one, so you'll have that to look forward to when I get to that on this doll. So, if you like this video, don't forget to give me a big thumbs up. Don't forget to share. Don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. And I will see you in the next video. Bye.